Did the Kansas Jayhawks do enough to get rolling in the transfer portal this next season? And do they have any impact recruits?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into the Portal Podcast, where you get your daily transfer portal, NIL, and recruiting scoop. I'm your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Amazon Fire TV. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console is needed. Head over to Amazon Fire /Fire TV Locked On to learn more. We're going to talk all things Kansas Jayhawks. Did they get enough in the portal? Who did they get that's an impact player? Where do they still need to spend? And going to talk a little bit of recruiting for Kansas. Who's going to be an impact recruit? And to finalize, Big 12. Do we really know who's going to win it this year? I don't know. But to help me figure that out, my guy over here covering Kansas, Derek Johnson, Locked On Jayhawks. Derek, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on here. We've been in the thick of things with the portal for basketball season. So the football one, I love to circle back with this stuff.
Yeah, it's always fun to have a little bit of overlay. I know Kansas fans are pretty
sure the coaches don't like it. Yeah.
Well, that's a whole nother story. I went to Indiana, so I know the same thing. Like the football coaches, no matter what they do, it's still basketball school. It's the same deal. All right, let's talk Kansas in terms of the portal in the spring, and we can mix in a little bit from the winter as well. First question, do you think the transfer portal additions, is anybody that like really excites you that they picked up in the spring or anything in general? Like, is there a trend or they just get more depth? What's the deal with Kansas this spring?
Yeah, the spring, it's been a little bit more minimal in terms of what they've done. It was mostly just what happened this past weekend when they really picked up, I guess, 3 guys from basically Thursday through Sunday in the portal. One of them is kind of a depth addition to the corner position with Saeed Gibbs. And that's, somebody who could be your third or fourth corner possibly. I think when you look at Alex Bray, like he's an interesting player for me from Illinois because he's 270 as a defensive end. He's kind of a 3-4 D end for Illinois. Comes over to Kansas where he'll be more of a 4-3 defensive end. Do they use him a little bit on the interior at times in pass rush situations? He played almost 400 snaps with Illinois, but he might be more of a rotational piece too. I think the biggest addition they made so far in the spring portal was Enrique Cruz Jr. He was a starter for Syracuse, and then with the new staff that came over, he ended up not being a starter this past season. But he has a lot of game experience. And for Kansas, they feel really good about 3 of their offensive line spots. Bryce Foster, the former portal player from Texas A&M from a year ago, he had a really good season, was an all Big 12 player for KU. Kobe Baines has been a really good, solid player for them on the interior as a guard. And then Calvin Clements, who's a former, 4-star recruit who was with Baylor, decommitted, comes to Kansas, stays as a local kid, gets a little bit of playing time at the end of his true freshman season, plays a little bit that last year in his second year. He's kind of projected to be the starting left tackle, but it's who's going to fill the other 2 spots. And you go back to the winter portal that they had, they brought on a bunch of offensive linemen. Some of those were more developmental long-term pieces. Some of those expected to play. Some of them were hurt, though, in spring. They needed to go out and get somebody they felt good about being a starter, and I think that's what they feel like they got with Cruz.
He had 738 snaps, all left tackle for his starts in 2023. I mean, Kansas, that's a pretty good steal because, like you said, I don't know what happened, but something didn't go right between him and the new staff, and that's Kansas's benefit. If you started at left tackle in the P4, you've got some ability, and he's a big dude. So Kansas picks up a good one there. Losses into the portal that concern you from the spring window, who would those be?
Yeah, so in the spring, they haven't lost a ton so far. I mean, everybody's losing players that were walk-ons that are going to other schools. The one that entered that has, I think, maybe the highest ceiling, the highest potential is By Job, who was a former 4-star recruit, former top 100 recruit, was a raw player, but he had all the athletic traits in the world that you'd want from a defensive end. goes to Michigan State, transfers to Kansas last year. And it was really exciting that they were going to have him. It was exciting they were going to have DJ Warner, who he obviously transferred back in the winter. And now those guys are gone. So that hurts you, I think, from a future perspective. I don't know how much that'll hurt from now. It's kind of more so what do those guys become. But the entrant who was the last entrant that we heard about, which it came out after the portal actually closed, but, I think there's like a 48-hour window with the schools having to do paperwork and stuff like that. And it was Keon Burnett. And Burnett was in a strong competition with Sean Hanukkah, who's a former Iowa State transfer, for the starting tight end position. Hanukkah came in last year and he tore his Achilles in spring football. So he missed the full season, got a medical red shirt to come back. And yes, I think Hanukkah was doing well so far this spring, but that's a lot of I guess eggs in one basket you got to put on Hanukkah now as being kind of the lone guy in the starting tight end competition. They have another former transfer in Leighton Cure, who I guess moves up to 2 on the 2 deep at this point in time. But Burnett was a former 4-star recruit, really athletic tight end. I think Jalon Daniels was going to enjoy throwing to the tight ends with new offensive coordinator Jim Zabrowski in there a little more to what they were doing a couple of years ago with Andy Kotelnicki. And that certainly hurts you from a personnel perspective. It hurts you from a depth perspective, and it hurts you from just a ceiling perspective. I think Burnett is the type of guy that, as a former 4-star recruit tight end, had shown some flashes, but it never really fully came together when he was at Arizona. If he had a big enough season, that's a potential pro player that you had on your team. And now you don't have that around. And obviously it makes you scramble this late in the game, having somebody that definitively was on your 2 deep and might have been a starter.
Yeah, that's a big deal. When you lose depth pieces before a season even starts, it's one thing, but somebody, could play starter minutes, etc. There's a lot of ways to look at this. But if you look at the teams, even in the Big 12, and we both know that league is really hard to pick. I mean, last year, Arizona State was picked 16th out of 16 teams and won the league. One player can make the difference. So that's an important factor. Next, which position, let's just go winter and spring combined, do you think the Jayhawks improved the most through the transfer portal?
I think it's got to be linebacker. When you look at linebacker, really, I don't know, every year of the Lance Leipold era, and even if you want to go back a few years before then, they've had one of the worst linebacker cores in the Big 12, and I think it had been getting better. Rich Miller was a serviceable player for them. Last year, I think when they were healthy, like when Cornell Wheeler was healthy at the beginning of the season, it was getting better. J.B. Brown was a good player. Like they've had solid players or 1 or 2 here, but they haven't had the depth. They haven't had the full arsenal of linebackers. And this year they go out, they get Bengali Kamara. That was actually a pre-winter transfer edition because he transferred from South Carolina into the season. They got him at one point in the season, and supposedly he's doing very well. I think he's going to be a stud he might be the best linebacker or give them the best linebacker production of a KU linebacker of the Leipold era so far. And then you add on Joseph Sipp from Bowling Green, somebody who had production at the MAC level that worked for them with J.B. Brown coming from Bowling Green as well. And then Trey Lathan, you bring in as well. Lathan was a starting linebacker from West Virginia. And some of the PFF grades didn't love what Lathan did last season, but it was also his first season coming back off a major season-ending injury. And the thought is that he's going to be even better this year with another year under his belt, a guy who has a lot of experience. So, I mean, they might be playing a 4-2-5, a little bit of a 4-3, right? So it's really going to be, for the most part, 2 linebackers out there. It'll be interesting how they rotate those guys. But I think they've completely overhauled that position. And I think they feel like it's a much more athletic position now. I think they feel like it's not just going to be a weakness in the Big 12 at this point.
Has Kansas improved enough at corner? They got Saeed Gibbs. Have they improved enough that in a league where there's always quarterbacks, I mean, that league always got guys can throw it around, that they can have a game where they're a little off offensively and still win a, let's say, 20s game? There aren't a lot of those in the Big 12 anymore, but can they win one of those games against quality competition?
Well, I think the defense has gotten a little bit better each and every year. It kind of plateaued from this year to last year, but you lost Austin Booker and some other players. The corner is going to be tough, though, because with Kobe Bryant, he was a 3-time first-team All-Big 12 selection. He's off to the NFL. And undrafted, so maybe that gives you a little bit of hope that it is replaceable, right? But you lose Mello Dotson, too. He was like a 3-4 year starter for you on the outside who was a multiple-time All-Big 12 pick, too. So that's going to be a tough position to replace. Now, the good news is corner might be the position that they've recruited the best outside of defensive end, but then they lost some of those players in the portal. They've been able to retain those from the corner position so far. So like Jalen Todd, who was kind of a borderline 3-4-star recruit, he comes to Kansas. He is going to be a sophomore this year. He got some playing time late in the year last year. He's projected to be one of the starters, very talented player. DJ Graham, who's a former Oklahoma starter and then turned like receiver and then went to Utah State, had a pretty good year there. He transfers in to give him some experience. You mentioned Saeed Gibbs. Jaleel Hurley, who's a former 4-star recruit from Alabama, he transferred in. Then you got guys like Jameel Croft, Austin Alexander, Andre Gibson, Jacoby Davis, all of which were kind of between that bubble of either like high-end 3-star or low-end 4-star recruit, that they have some talent here. It's just going to be a question about how experienced can they get. And then there's the other added factor where it's a new defensive coordinator, DK McDonald, who's previously with the Eagles, who was a defensive backs coach there, and was before that with Iowa State, who typically has really good defenses and good defensive backs. So I think this is trending to being one of the better defenses of the Leipold era, but there is a lot of kind of unknowns with some of the players.
Well, there's always unknowns in the transfer portal era. This much I know for absolute fact. When we come back, we got more transfer portal on the Kansas Jayhawks right here on this crossover edition of Locked On Jayhawks and the Portal Podcast. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off grows closer, and their last-minute ticket deals can save you up to 60%. Last-minute ticket deals doesn't just go with the playoffs either. You can do it on baseball. You could even do it on comedy, theater, maybe go to a concert with your friends, whatever you want to do. Last-minute ticket deals are fantastic, especially, again, up to 60%. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, let's continue on talking some Kansas transfer portal and what's next for them over there with Lance Leipold. I think, by the way, he's one of the most underrated guys in the country. Being at a basketball school in the middle of the country, in the middle of a wheat field, probably has something to do with that, but they've done such an incredible job. Next up, offensive line. I remember watching the game against Colorado last year, and I'm like, they're just beating the bejesus out of them. Did you sense any of that coming in, or was that kind of like the epiphany? Hey, we could run the ball. Let's just keep doing it. What was the deal with that, and what's the prognosis for this next season?
Yeah, I mean, it's something where the KU offensive line, I think, has been very underrated these past couple of years, and it's been a different offensive line coach both years, but that's something that they've done really well, develop those guys. They've also had some good players. Bryce Cable was just drafted. Logan Brown was an undrafted free agent pickup by the Vikings. Probably would have been drafted if not for some stuff that happened at Wisconsin. And they also had Dominic Pooney, who was drafted in not this draft, but the draft before, and immediately was like a starter for the 49ers. So they've had some good talent there, but also like you look at like Pro Football Focus grades, they've been a top 40 run block and pass block unit in both areas each of the last 2 years, and ranking even higher in some of those areas. Like last year, they were, I think, the highest graded run blocking team that wasn't like one of the military schools. So it's been something they've done well. It's something they do well schematically, because they don't necessarily always have the big 330 pounders who are 5-star recruits at some of the SEC schools, but they do a good job playing to their strengths, right? So they're going to get out in the open field. They're going to run some wide zone. They're going to run some speed option. They're going to keep teams guessing and have players that on the offensive line are mobile and athletic in addition to doing those things, and then they play to those strengths. And then there was a little, because Kansas also really good running. I mean, Devin Neal, all-time leader in rushing yards in Kansas football history. So that helps there too. I think there was a little fuel thrown to the fire from Colorado that week. I don't remember everything exactly that was said, but I do remember like Warren Sapp going on a video before the game and kind of talking about like, they're not going to be able to run the ball, and Jalon Daniels is going to get like beat up if he tries to run the ball, and all this sort of stuff. And I remember there was some chirping from KU in the locker room afterwards. So I think it was kind of a perfect storm and a little bit of it. Like, even though Colorado was a good enough team to, win 9 games last year, I do think, in the trenches, if you could out physical them, I mean, you maybe even saw that in the BYU game and the bowl game too, like that would be their problem. And Kansas, for their faults last year, they had a lot of 1-score losses. They won 5 games, but they were a physical team still. And that's been a consistent with Lance Leipold. They are physical. They're not going to shy away from contact. They're going to play tough.
So they added Enrique Cruz. Do they need another piece, or are they going to be okay? Like, they got enough depth to sustain an injury or two, or this a little bit of fringe on what the O-line is going to be for this next season?
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally, if another good offensive lineman is there and available and at the right NIL price and you can make all that stuff work, then yeah, I think that'd be ideal. But I also think at this point now they're comfortable with it, feeling like if Cruz can be your 4th starter and looking at the other starting spot, which would be your final guard spot, because with guard, it's a little bit easier to, if you have a weak point at guard, you can at least make up for that with double teams with the center, a little bit easier than a tackle who's on an island. And they do have Tavaki Tuiko Lovato, and I hope that's the right way to pronounce it. That's how I've been saying it. But he's the transfer from UCLA, and big kid coming in, redshirt sophomore. He's one of those players who they were hoping would come in and take down one of the starting spots, but he was hurt during spring ball a little bit. So he might be able to do that in fall with the guard spot. They also have Nolan Gorchika, who's in his 5th year now of college football, who's going to be competing for that. Amir Herring, who's a former 4-star recruit from Michigan, transferred in last year. He'll be a redshirt sophomore. Maybe he'll be developed enough to take down that spot. Like, I think there are capable players. Tyler Mercer was a true freshman, really strong player for North Texas a season ago. He comes in as a sophomore. The idea has been that he'll be the future center after Bryce Foster graduates, but maybe they use him at guard this year. So I think they have enough depth pieces and they have enough options to kind of fill down. The question is, will one guy kind of emerge who is clearly better than the rest?
That's always the question, my friend. You got to have that 5th starter, or then if not, other teams know where to attack. Overall, do you think that Kansas spent enough money in NIL to get what they needed so far in the winter window, and at least thus far, it's not closed yet for gaining players through spring?
Yeah, I forget who has this quote, but how much is enough money? And the answer is more. Is that Warren Buffett? I don't remember. Anyway, so like there's a certain point where it's like, well, of course they could have done even more. Like, you could have had even more money and done more, right? But considering what the expectations would be, I think from maybe the outside or yada yada, I think they did do enough. They had a lot of spots to fill. I mean, you're talking like 30 seniors graduated from KU. So that makes it tough when you're having to budget out getting as many players as they had to go out and get. And so maybe you're not going to end up with, a bunch of All-American picks, but typically those kids aren't coming to Kansas out of the football transfer portal anyway. So I think they did a good job spreading it around. And then you also have to add in the factor that, with Kansas, they're rebuilding their stadium right now. It's like a $350 million project. And so the fact that you're having donors have to constantly donate for that, and that happening while also funding the NIL right now, it is as difficult of a time as ever to be building a new football stadium, right? I mean, a lot of these other schools getting it done maybe 10, 15 years ago, that ended up being such an advantage right now where donors can just focus on NIL. So I think considering that, there's also a picture going around with somebody who is in relation to Enrique Cruz Jr., for instance, with Brad Garlinghouse, who's like a big donor. He's got he's like 10 billion net worth, some tech guy in Silicon Valley, and talking about is a picture with him like, oh, we hope you can come out and see a game with Enrique Cruz. Probably easy to connect the dots there and figure out that, okay, maybe that was the closing deal that made this happen. So I think the KU donors are doing enough. I think they're doing a lot right now between the football stadium, basketball, football. I think they're being stretched thin, but they're doing their part. So yeah, I think they did as much as they could. And I think the football staff has really prioritized keeping guys with a lot of the money, and then with whatever's left over, kind of going out and getting what they can. And I think Lance Leipold has done a tremendous job at that.
All right. Well, that sounds like they're on the right path then. I mean, when you've got football renovations and stuff, it gets expensive.
Really I think it's exciting once that stuff ends. Is that money
to sell?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And then is there just extra money lying around, right?
Yeah, well, you hope it keeps coming in. That's the idea. Transfer who surprises for Kansas would be who?
So this depends on the level, right? If I want to have a bold take here, Emmanuel Henderson, who's a former like 4-star recruit running
Yep.
back from Alabama, and obviously
I
comes in,
know
ends up
him.
being a receiver, has that big catch against Georgia. He comes over to Kansas this year. Kansas has not had a 1,000-yard receiver since the days of Kerry Meyer and Desmond Briscoe, which is a long time ago. That's about 15 years ago. So
I'll say that's been a minute.
yes. So if you're saying like, okay, what could be a surprise? Well, 1,000-yard receiver, we haven't seen that in a while. I wouldn't be shocked if Emmanuel Henderson. The coaching staff can't stop raving about him. Super fast, and I think he goes from Alabama, where you're behind just some other really good receivers, to Kansas, where you're the number one receiver. So, like from that standpoint, I would look at him. But if you're looking at somebody maybe who, because I don't know that he's necessarily under the radar, so to speak. If you are looking at somebody maybe a little bit more under the radar, I'm really into Justice Finkley. He's the senior transfer from Texas, kind of a rotational player. Again, just in a situation where at Texas, you're behind a lot of NFL players or a lot of players who are really good college players. You come to Kansas, you're the top defensive end, or at least top strong side defensive end for Kansas. I think you could have a really solid season for KU on the outside and playing a little bit more. So Finkley and Henderson, a couple SEC transfers.
I would agree with that. When we come back, a little recruiting, and then got to put Derek on the spot on the Big 12 talk. Which teams are going to rise? Is Kansas going to be one of them? That is next here on this crossover, Locked On Jayhawks and Locked On the Portal. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. FanDuel makes betting easy, whether it's picking your favorite or diving into player props. For me, as a basketball guy, I love three-point shots. How many is somebody going to make? Or how many points they're going to get because of the three-point line. You can also talk about steals, rebounds, assists, and a lot of other stats just in basketball. That doesn't count baseball with it getting going and all the other things going on. Plus, as the game tips off, if you didn't get your bet in, you can still live bet with FanDuel. Don't miss out. Head over to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Derek, did Kansas secure a recruit that you think can come in and play beyond special teams that people would notice?
As a freshman, it's going to be tough. I think, and honestly, this is a good thing with where they've gotten, because, several years ago or at the beginning of Leipold or before Lance Leipold, like this was the thing where they unfortunately had to do, and guys got thrown into the fire just too early. I don't really view someone right now. Like it was a big deal 2 years ago when one of their true freshman receivers even made the 2 deep, and he only made the 2 deep because they extended one of the receiver positions to really a 3 deep. And he was the only one on there. So Lance Leipold doesn't love to play true freshmen unless he absolutely has to. And so I don't really see anyone right now that I'm like, you would be on the 2 deep. If it had to happen to one guy, I guess I would just take like the top recruit in the class, Adrian Hawley. Defensive end is a position that maybe is a little bit more open in terms of who the second and third string is going to be. And Kansas will rotate their defensive line. They'll play. If they have 8 good ones, they'll play 8 good ones. If they have 5 good ones, they'll play 5 good ones, right? They'll rotate them as much as they can. And Hawley is a 6'4", 240-pound defensive end, 4-star recruit coming in. He's somebody with a lot of length, like really long wingspan. Maybe that can translate over to playing right away as a freshman. We saw Deshaun Warner play a decent amount as a true freshman last year. So my money would honestly be on if you gave me the over-under of 0.5 on the 2 deep to start the season as true freshman, I would honestly take the under. But yeah, I mean, I'd just go with the talent with Adrian Hawley at this point in time. But I do think some interesting long-term players in the class.
Is that kind of the plan for KU? They want to be a developmental program?
Yes. So, again, going back to the NIL thing, Lance Leipold likes to use a lot of it on retaining players, retention, getting them to know the scheme. You'll see a lot of players redshirt with Kansas. Like that's part of the idea. They do like to use the 4 games that the players can play. And obviously if you can make the bowl game, then that too. But that is something that they definitely emphasize. And Matt Gildersleeve, their strength and conditioning coach, is one of the best in the country. He is so on top of it, and really having guys who stick in there. That first year, you see the development go. It's night and day seeing these kids from their first year to their second year. And, when you're at Kansas, again, you're not bringing in – it's a big deal if Kansas gets 1 or 2 4-star recruits in a class. So a lot of times it is going to be more of these guys who are going to be developmental, and you kind of have to work it with the slow approach.
It sounds like Kansas would be a very good comparison to the Big Ten's Iowa Hawkeyes. They redshirt a lot of kids. They're very well coached, and you're not going to out-scheme because they're playing juniors and seniors that pretty much know what they're doing. That's not a bad plan, to be
Nope.
really honest.
Hopefully more offense. But yes.
Well, I mean, I think me, you, and 9 Dead Nuns could go beat some of the teams that Iowa lost to.
I'd gladly take the defense, though. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. If Kansas had Iowa's defense, they'd win the Big 12 every year.
Yeah, it'd be a fun combo. The KU offense and the Iowa defense. You might be cooking with something now.
Yeah. Speaking of the Big 12, where do you think Kansas falls into this category this year? And I know this is 6 one way, half dozen the other, but again, 16th last year. That is what the media picked Arizona State, and they made the playoff as the Big 12 representative.
Well, to that notion, like if you go over to our sports betting partner, FanDuel, Houston, Arizona's the at the bottom of the barrel right now, 65-1 odds there. Houston is second to last at 50-1. And I'm kind of just like, there's a part of me that's just like, after seeing what you just mentioned, and Houston did have a good recruiting class and good transfer portal class, and I think Willie Fritz is a really good head coach.
I do too.
I'm like, that might not be the worst bet in the world. And honestly, there's a part of me that just wonders if you just each and every year take the bottom 3 or 4 in the Big 12 on those odds, and you basically say, okay, between Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, Houston, Arizona, one of them might make the Big 12 championship game. Who knows? This stuff's so crazy that then you can maybe play the odds that way. So I actually do think Houston's going to surprise some teams from the bottom. I do like what Texas Tech is having, but at the same point in time, the fact that Tech is the betting favorite right now, I know it's no rhyme or reason, but in a conference as wild as the Big 12, it almost makes you not want to pick a team who is the betting favorite. So I do think Kansas has as good of a shot as any. I think the schedule worked out pretty well for KU. They just can't beat Baylor, and they didn't draw Baylor on the schedule this year. Kansas State, who's going to be good again, they get Kansas State at least in Lawrence this year. I don't believe Texas Tech on the schedule this year. So you look at the schedule, it's not the worst thing in the world. And I guess things are going to change in season because some team you think is going to be not that good is going to end up being 8-4 or something with how the Big 12 goes. But that's kind of the beauty of it. You go in each week going, yeah, they could win this game, but they could also lose this game.
The reason I think Kansas has a great chance to be in the Big 12 title game, you got a great coach. You kind of gelled towards the end of last year. And what you told me today, which, by the way, thank you for, the O-line, if it's good again, Jalen's going to make some plays. He's wacky in terms of being hot and cold at times. When he's on, and if you can run the ball, that offense is a nightmare because they create so many matchup problems with, again, excellent coaching and experienced players. But I think Jaylen is the key. If they're going to make a run, he's got to be more consistent. He was floating around in Never Land a few times last year. I'm like, looking at the stats, I'd be watching another game, and I'm like, he's got 2 picks. What's going on? Can you explain what happened? Did teams figure him out? Was it what's the deal with that? And do you expect more out of Jaylen this season?
Yes, would be the short answer to the last part of it. So he went his first couple years. The big question was, could he stay healthy? But when you saw him on the field, he was electric. He stayed healthy last year. He just, like you said, it was inconsistencies. Now, the final 7 games of the season, he played really well. He looked like the guy that we were used to. But those first 5 games, they were rough. People were wondering, is he going to get benched? People were wondering if, deservedly so. They had a new offensive coordinator in there, Jeff Grimes, who was let go by Baylor. They brought him in after Andy Kotelnicki left to Penn State. And I just don't think they really jived that well. Grimes' offense was more, he wanted to throw the ball either vertically or on screens. And I think the one that killed KU the most was they threw a screen pass at the end of the first half against Illinois, got picked 6th, and ended up losing that game in a 1-score game that ends up being the difference. And he just didn't have the same confidence. You could see it. The offense wasn't being tailored to his way. And then there were times where he was locking in too much on one guy. Didn't seem like he was reading the defenses that well. They kind of adjusted after a bye week, kind of mid-season, what they were doing. Jim Zebrowski, who's now the offensive coordinator, he was the guy calling plays when they put up 49 points in their bowl game a couple years ago. Jeff Grimes leaves for Wisconsin. He'll now be the offense coordinator, and he and Jalon Daniels have a great relationship. So I think that's going to be helpful, and the offense is going to probably look a little bit more like it did with Kotelnicki than it did last year with Grimes, even though there still were some similarities there. So I expect him to have, if he can stay healthy, his best collegiate season. But again, I still do wonder about the health. But yeah, there were some inconsistencies there. I think it was a combination of mental. I think it was a combination of the coaching staff. It also, because of the injuries, he missed a lot of spring ball and fall practice last year. So he just didn't get in the same rhythm with his receivers early in the season. And the hope is that because he missed some of spring this year too, that won't happen again to start this year.
Do they have a go-to receiver for Jaylen, or is it going to be spread it around?
Going back to the transfer talk, I think Emmanuel Henderson is going to be that guy on the outside. But outside of that, I mean, they have like 3 other transfers in there. They have like 4 incoming freshmen. They've got a couple returners. Doug Emelian, a former transfer, has been kind of a rotational piece at receiver for Minnesota, good route runner. But I think it's mostly going to be him. They've spread the ball around a lot. They'll throw it to running backs. They'll throw it to 2 or 3 tight ends in a given set. It's really been balanced how they've used the different receivers in the past. But yeah, I think Henderson is kind of the go-to guy.
I appreciate that, sir. Thank you for all the information. You're very, very knowledgeable on the Jayhawks. Derek, tell everybody where they can find all your work.
Locked On Jayhawks at D Johnson Radio on Twitter. And thank you, Brian, for having me on.
Absolutely. You can find the Portal Podcast all the places you download: Apple, Spotify, Odyssey, Podbean, anywhere you get them. And of course, on YouTube. Take it to the gym, take it on a road trip, wherever you want to go. Give us a thumbs up and a 5-star review. We will see you again soon on the Portal Podcast.